Welcome back, guys. Today I've got this topic that I've been really sitting on for a little while. I do a daily devotional, and I read this one, and it's really something that's been coming back to me time and time again, something I've really meditated on and prayed about. And I wanted to share just a portion of the devotional with you and then kind of talk more about the parts that really hit home for me. So, we often don't get to see what we've planted grow. Motivational speaker and teacher Dennis Swansberg tells the story of his great-grandfather who came from Sweden in the 1880s. He moved to just east of Austin, Texas. He built a house and planted shade trees because in Texas, you need some shade trees to break the wind and provide relief from the heat. When Swansberg's grandfather was just 5 years old, his great-grandfather passed away. Swansberg recounts that his great-grandfather never got to sit under the shade trees that he planted. But his grandfather did, his mother did, and Swansberg and his two boys did. They've all sat under those oak trees, which have provided shade for generations. I just really like that story. And it goes on, how do you plant a shade tree that will last generations? It's the kind of life that we live. And that is the part that really had me thinking, what are some shade trees? Because it's just the analogy, right? And this devotional is from The Legacy Life by David Green, who is the founder and owner of Hobby Lobby. But it really had me thinking, what are some shade trees that I want to plant figuratively for future generations of my family and those around me? And I'm really I've been praying about this and really thinking about this, but for me, what that means is I really hope to plant the shade trees or the seeds for future generations of my family to remember me for my love of Jesus and spreading the gospel. That's just critical to me. And I want that to be something that continues to grow through generations of my family. Another thing is having a positive and grateful attitude. It's so easy to be wrapped up in the negativity of this world, especially when you're running businesses, but really just focusing on having a positive and grateful attitude. Being a hard worker, not only for your family, but for those around you, and that's something that I've talked about before, is how it's not just about working hard for you and your family, but then once you get to a certain level, other people start to rely on you, and that's why it's so important that you work for others as well, providing opportunities for others as well. And it's just something for me about really being intentional about that part of it and acknowledging that it's not just about me or my family. And then just being a loving husband and a loving father. It's just so important to me to plant that seed and set that example for my family. So when me and Hill's relationship can be that example for the kids. So when kids in Brooklyn are looking for a man to marry, they know some qualities that they want to look for because of the example that I was able to set. And for Cooper to latch on to some of the qualities and examples I've set and use them to be an even better man than I am. But I want to intentionally plant shade trees of opportunities for future generations of my family and for those around me. It's not just exclusive to my family, but planting those opportunities for future generations and being intentional about the fact that it's not just going to be my family, because it's a community thing, and there's just so many opportunities that can come from if you are intentional about planting these shade trees. And something Hill and I did a few years ago, which is kind of funny, we did plant shade trees on our property. And I was just thinking about that as I was reading this devotional, how we planted these pretty small, relatively small trees but we were young when we planted them. We were 34 years old when we planted these trees. We live on 2.5 acres out in the country, and we need wind block. And so we started planting. We took one year and we were just very strategic about planting some trees because we knew it would create some wind block down the road. And because we were young, hopefully we will get to see the fruits of that. But to me, after reading this, I'm just thinking about not only my kids, but my grandkids and great-grandkids and great-great-grandkids that could potentially get to play under these trees or benefit from the wind block that the pine trees will provide for the property. And it just really makes me think back to, how are we being generational about our finances, about our resources, about our opportunities, about spreading our faith in Jesus? How am I being intentional about making sure that I'm leaving a generational impact, not in a selfish way, but in a selfless way? And I think it just comes down to just how intentional you are in serving God and following the path that He has for you, not trying to create your own path. And with that, it's just a humbling road, because there's going to be times where you are struggling to figure out which way does God want me to go. And you have to just really pray about it. And guess what? You're going to make mistakes. You're going to take the wrong path sometimes. I've taken the wrong path. And you just have to get back to, okay, that didn't work. What can I do now? What adjustments do I need to make? So Chapman, with listening to that devotional, what are some, in theory, shade trees that you are wanting to be intentional about planting for your kids and your family for generations to come? Is that something you've really even thought about before hearing this devotional? Because I would say it's been a thing in the back of my head at times. I want to leave a generational impact, but I would say it didn't really fully click for me until reading this and being more intentional about praying about it and wanting to leave a legacy life that isn't just finance or isn't just property or wealth. It's living life in a certain way that serves God, helps your community, furthers His kingdom, and sets your family up for generations of just happiness.
Yeah, I have not really thought about this before, but obviously understand what you're discussing and what you're getting at and everything that you mentioned. I think one of the biggest things that I want to provide for my kids as they get older is something that was kind of provided for me as well, which was, I guess I'd more so say for, perspective of my dad, since I've been in the same town as him since I was born. Mm-hmm. I've got split parents, and, my mom and stepdad don't live here anymore. But,
right.
One big thing for me is, I've always known, no matter, the circumstance or, where I was at in life or what age, he was always going to be a person that was going to have my back and, be able to grow knowing, I have that foundation. So yes, while it's not something physical, not,
stability,
monetary, it's that stability.
Yeah.
And just if I have to call somebody or if I need help with, something small or something big or, whatever it is, I have 4 parents, all of which, would do anything for me. And it seems something small, but it's really, a lot of people don't have that kind of support.
Oh, yeah.
Or, they turn 18 and they lose a lot of it and, are kind of told, do this on your own. And yes, there's been things that I've been helped with and there's things that I've done on my own as well. But, I already see me learning off of what my parents have given me and what my dad has given me as far as how I act towards my children or
mm-hmm.
even, other family members in that aspect, just showing I'll always be here. And, I've always wanted to make sure I portray myself, as a parent in that way. Mm-hmm. So when they get older, they know how to act themselves, whether it's towards, their own kids or, their niece, their nephew, things like that. I guess if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think to summarize it, it is stability and knowing somebody has always got your back and will be supportive. And it might be a tough love situation. It might be just help you through a situation. But at the end of the day, that you have people that have got your back and you want to provide that stability where your kids always know that you have always got their back. You will always help them any way you can.
Yeah, and it's just, for my family, we've always been, I think almost every single person in my family, and I have a very large extended family, we've always very much so been a family first, type of people. And, we were raised in the church. Not everybody in my family, I've got a lot of Catholic family as well, but, everybody puts God first, puts, family first, since I was little, and that's always what I remember, and that's how I'm gonna raise my kids as well. And that's how I believe. We've talked about it on here so many times. Is how that is how you should be raised, and raising your kids and things like that. And
Yeah, I mean, God being the foundation just sets everything up for so much more success. And I've seen that. I've seen that growing up with my parents, not having that foundation, but having success, but having, I would say, more trials because of that not being being the foundation. And obviously when challenges arose, people weren't equipped to have any sort of foundation to fall back on. Like now, Hill and I go through challenges all the time, but our foundation is so strong in Jesus that it doesn't shake us like that. Of course, there's going to be hard days. I'm going to get, there's definitely days where I'm not proud of the way I acted. Maybe I got angry or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, I do want to have a generational impact, because I know that it's going to, and we have an obligation, right? Because we don't know when Jesus is coming back. It could be tomorrow. It could be 1,000 years from now. But we have an obligation for future generations to be able to have the gospel, at their fingertips, be able to serve and further his kingdom, being able to help others, giving your family opportunities to be able to grow their faith freely and help others come to know Jesus. Those are all just so important to me. But 10 years ago, that's not the way I would have answered it. It would have been, I want to leave, my kids with, opportunities and potentially some wealth financially. But now for me, it's more about making sure I'm leaving the generational impact of living a godly life, being a good husband, being a good father, and using the wealth and resources that God has given us to further his kingdom and help others, as opposed to focusing so much on just, like I said, a selfish viewpoint of it.
Right. And one thing that Callie kind of gets on me about recently, or not recently, kind of the past year, is she has wanted to take the kids to church. Yeah, they're just going to the daycare at church, so they're not really even learning anything. Now that Sonny's 2, now they'll start going to like a preschool, but or daycare, Sunday school type thing. But she's been very intentional about, hey, let's make sure we're going now, so it's something that's just already embedded in them.
Right.
And then, they get older, they realize, oh, yeah, my parents, that's just what we did. And It wasn't a question of, there were times where me and my brothers, do we have to go to church today? Do we have to go? And I think a lot of it was, we were in, travel soccer or other things. We're traveling a lot to see family. And so it was easy to get off that horse for a month and then go back, and do we have to go? And we're teenagers, not really have to sit through church, but that's one thing that Callie's wanted to kind of embed in them, and kind of build that tree of sorts. Is it's just what we do. Like that's what you do. It's not a question about on Sundays. It's like I think in some cases, given our job, we're kind of making it to where we can go more now, or even it's on Saturday nights, but. That's something that we're kind of building as well. More as I'm thinking about this more, is just something that's church is just what you do. And it's
setting foundational habits, right?
Yeah.
Going to church on Sunday is just a foundational habit for our family. Giving is just giving is a foundational habit. That's something Hill and I have been more intentional over the last couple of years of talking with the kids about, praying about with them, and showing them, hey, we are supposed to give God our first and our best, and we are much more intentional about that, as opposed to years ago where it was just put the tithe on auto pay and it's good to go type thing. That's not. We wanted to be more intentional with it and setting a foundation of we give because he has given us all of it. We're supposed to give a portion of it to further ministry, further his church, further his kingdom. And it's taken me a lot of years to get there. It's not easy for the the average person to go from being selfish, which I was selfish with resources and time, to trying to be more selfless and knowing that God has a much bigger calling than just being wealthy or having super nice things. Like, there's nothing wrong with those things at all, as long as you are still furthering his kingdom, helping others, tithing, and setting a good, humble example for your family, especially when you're the man of the house and you're supposed to be leading.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And as you're kind of saying that, kind of to reiterate, for those listening, it's important to remember that, the analogy that you're saying, with the tree, it doesn't have to be something, like you mentioned, it doesn't have to be something physical, it doesn't have to be money, it doesn't have to be land, it doesn't have to be, whatever. It can be something that any person in any situation can contribute to, build for the future.
Yeah. And that's where I'm trying to get at. Yeah, it's even more important, the qualities and the priorities that you pass down to the next generation, even more than money or the fancy stuff or the cool stuff, the big house. You're passing down a positive attitude to your kids and a heart of gratitude is just, to me, so much more important, because that's going to get them so much further in life than just handing them $1 million. It's so much more important to instill those values and priorities and read scripture with them and talk to them about their goals and where they want to get to in life and how they want to contribute to helping their community. Having those conversations and setting that foundational work, it's hard when you're not intentional about it. But I think once you kind of get that frame of mind of, what are some shade trees that I want to plant for future generations, figuratively and literally, because there's nothing wrong with setting up your family for long-term opportunities financially, to create more opportunities for others and generations to come. But it's so important that you are setting those foundational priorities and goals and things like that for the future generations as well. So I think the main thing I just want to end with for anybody listening is, what are some shade trees that you want to start planting for your family? And if you don't have a family, what are some shade trees that you would want to plant for your future generations if you're not yet there? What are some habits you could start to create? What are some intentional things you could start to work on to plant shade trees for future generations that you may or may not see the fruit from? I think it's cool that you got David Green, the owner of Hobby Lobby, that he talks about, if you read some of his books, he sees 4 generations at a family gathering now. He is seeing the fruit of a big shade tree in Hobby Lobby that he planted years ago with his wife. And, some of us are going to be fortunate enough to see that. Some of us are not. But if you are intentional about it, the trees can get planted, and those priorities, those goals, those good qualities, those, hardworking, being loving and caring and serving others, those qualities can get planted and run on for future generations.